Let's get this party started. I have got, for everyone's benefit, today's daf, which, assuming everything else is correct, is page 44. And we're going to be picking it up on the Mishnah over there on page 44. So that's where we're going to be starting from. If you're looking inside the actual daf, it's 6 lines down. And the main topic that we are dealing with at the moment, we're now in the third chapter of Maseches Shabbos. And in the main, we are talking about muktzah. So muktzah, things which we are not supposed to move in case we end up using them and violating Shabbat in some way. So that is the primary focus of what we're going to be talking about today. And just to provide a tiny little bit of background to muktzah, there's going to be some concepts and some ideas that we will find helpful to have in our back pocket as we take a look at the material today. First and foremost, as with a lot of things in Judaism, the elements of muktzah and the parameters of what is allowed and what is not allowed is not universally agreed upon. And so is the screen still sharing, by the way?
Yeah, but something just came up.
Yeah, is it still there?
Yeah, that black thing.
Is it still okay, 1 second. Let me see what I can do. I'm trying to have multiple things open, which doesn't always work. Tell me when it disappears.
Disappeared.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not universally agreed upon what the parameters of muktzah are, and what we see is a consistent machlokes that goes on in this topic between two rabbis, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda has quite a broad definition of what would be classified as muktzah. I guess you could summarize it as anything that is not going to be, anything that is not expected to be used that Shabbos is considered not prepared for Shabbos. And if it's not prepared for Shabbos, it would be muktzah for you to touch. And Rabbi Shimon would have a more lenient approach, which is that if it is fit in theory to be used on Shabbos, then it would not be considered muktzah. So that's kind of like the broad sweeping brush of how to understand those different positions. Then there's other kind of concepts that are helpful to have in mind as one progresses through the topic of muktzah. For example, you have something called muktzah machmas isser. Muktzah on account of the fact that it is being used, but it would be forbidden to move it. So an example of a muktzah machmas isser, something that is forbidden to move, would be something like a burning candle. Because if you were to try and move a burning candle, then you may end up extinguishing it, which you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. So the mere potential violation that could come about from you moving it makes it muktzah to move on Shabbos. There are other types of muktzah. There's muktzah machmas mius, where something is so abhorrent and so disgusting that we therefore don't move it and we don't have it as a part of our what we get involved with on Shabbos. There's muktzah machmas chesron kis. There's a level of muktzah applied to items which are extremely valuable, and so we don't move those things, for example. Those are kind of the overarching types of things. There could be others as well, but those are some of the things to have in mind when it comes to this topic, to the topic of muktzah.
Rabbi Nick, could you explain a little bit why muktzah is muktzah? Like, what's the fundamental issue with why is there such a thing called muktzah?
Why is there such a thing called muktzah? Well, fundamentally, what we're afraid of is that we're going to end up violating Shabbat. And so as a safeguard to ensure that we don't end up violating Shabbat, we extend the parameter of what is acceptable to be handling on Shabbat, so that we don't come to end up violating it. So it's essentially a safeguard to have that in place. There's one other concept that comes up in this daf, which is also important to have in mind, which is the following phrase: "Migot de'iskatzai lebein hashmashos." Anything which would be forbidden to handle over Shabbos, which was in place for the entirety of a bein hashmashot period, for the entirety of a sunset twilight period leading to nightfall on Friday. So anything after candle lighting through till nightfall, if something is in place there, then it would be forbidden to move it throughout the whole of Shabbos. It remains muktzah throughout the whole of Shabbos. So hopefully I will be able to use all of this to paint a picture of what the daf is talking about today. And we're going to see there's two basic topics that the daf addresses today. One is the muktzah status of a candle, which, if we think about what candles looked like back in the day, would have been these earthenware. So I'm holding my fingers down there, but you're up here. An earthenware little oval kind shaped vessel, which would have had oil in it and a wick at one end. So that's one thing that we're going to be talking about today. And the second topic that we're going to be talking about is called hazmanah. Hazmanah means where you've dedicated an object for a certain use, but it hasn't necessarily been used in that way yet. And we're going to see that becomes relevant later on in the daf when we're talking about a bed that may or may not have been designated to have money on top of it. So that will all hopefully become understandable, relatable, and appreciable as we go through the daf. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I present to you daf 44a, where we have the Mishnah. Metaltalin ner chadash, aval lo yashan. The Mishnah says that you are allowed to move a new candle, a new lamp, but you would not be allowed to move an old one. And hopefully we will come to understand why that would probably be. Says the Mishnah, Rabbi Shimon Omer, kol haneros metaltalin. Rabbi Shimon says all candles are allowed to be moved, chutz min haner hadolek b'Shabbos, except for a candle that is currently alight, that is currently burning on Shabbos. Because if we remember, Rabbi Shimon has very broad application, a very broadly lenient application, I should say, of muktzah. And so if it is not currently burning and you don't run the risk of extinguishing it, then consistent with Rabbi Shimon, you would be allowed to move that candle on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, we're trying to understand whose opinion is all of the information that we've just said in the Mishnah. So Tana Rabbanan, the Baraisa says, Metaltalin ner chadash aval lo yashan divrei Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara presents to us that the opinion that we've just seen in the Mishnah is that of Rabbi Yehuda, that you're allowed to move a new candle, but you're not allowed to move an old candle. Now, why would that be? Because, according to Rabbi Yehuda, he is concerned for what we call muktzah machmas mius. An earthenware candle gets very oily, gets very disgusting the more you use it. And so a new lamp would not suffer from this. So for Rabbi Yehuda, you would actually be allowed to move a new one, because that is not yet ichi, to use the Talmudic phrase. But you would not be allowed to move an old one, because an old one has already become solid, and soiled from use. Thus, therefore. That sounds like a Rabbi Feldman phrase. potentially. Anyway, so that is the position of Rabbi Yehuda according to where we're at in the Gemara. Then the Gemara continues. Yeah, I'm still in the same place. Okay, very good. Then the Gemara continues. Rabbi Meir Omer, Kol haneros metaltalin chutz min haner shehidliki bar b'Shabbos. All candles are allowed to be moved, with the exception of a candle that is burning on Shabbos. Rabbi Shimon Omer, chutz min haner hadolek b'Shabbos. Rabbi Shimon says all lamps may be removed except for a lamp that is burning on Shabbos. But kabsa mutala taltala. But if it had gone out already, then you would be allowed to move it on Shabbos. So it would seem, according to Rabbi Meir, if it was lit on Shabbos, you would never be allowed to move it, even if it's gone out. But according to Rabbi Shimon, if it has gone out, you would be allowed to move it. It says the Gemara, aval kos uka'ara va'ashashis, larger types of vessels, a cup, a bowl, a lantern that are being used to light a candle. You fill them with oil and then you have lit them. These items, because they are larger, you would not be allowed to move. If I understand this correctly, the reason is because even according to Rabbi Shimon, because they're so large and there's so much oil and they burn for such a long time, according to Rabbi Shimon, it would never become relevant to use over Shabbos. Your mind would be so far off the idea of being able to use it that even according to Rabbi Shimon, who is typically so lenient, he would say you can't move these things because it's never going to come into a permissible way, into a permissible circumstance for you to move it. So even according to Rabbi Shimon, he would say these larger things that you're using for a candle, you would not be allowed to move them. And then we have a fourth opinion as well, but Rabbi Eliezer, but Rabbi Shimon. His own son, Rabbi Eliezer, says, Nistapek min haner hakava umin hashemen hametachtef va'afilu b'shar shehaner dolek. Rabbi Eliezer says, you can benefit from a light that has gone out, which we're going to see is consistent with Rabbi Shimon. And not only that, but you can benefit from oil that is dripping from the lamp, even when the lamp is alight. So that is the fourth opinion over there. So we had Rabbi Yehuda, who says that a new one is okay, an old one is not. We've had Rabbi Meir, who doesn't distinguish in that way, that he says that if it is a light on Shabbos, then you would not be allowed to use it at all. Rabbi Shimon says if it's a light, then you can't use it, but after that it's okay, unless it was a big candle holder, in which case you wouldn't be. And Rabbi Eliezer, his son, says that you can benefit from a candle which has gone out, and you can also benefit from oil that is dripping out of a candle, even while the light is still lit. Amar Abaye says, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon, Savala Kavuha B'chada. Abaye says that Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Shimon, holds like his father in one respect, Upaligalea B'chada, and he differs from his father in another respect. Says the Gemara. Am I in the right place? Over here. Savala Kavuha B'chada, he holds like his father in one respect, the Leislei Muktzah, in the fact that he holds like his father, that there is not really such a concept of muktzah, certainly not to the same extent as we've been seeing with the stricter opinions. But he disagrees with his father in one respect. Because his father holds that you can have benefit if it has gone out. You can move it if it has gone out, but you can't if it has not. The Ihu Sava, Rabbi Eliezer holds, Afagav the Lokava, even if it hasn't gone out, you would be allowed to benefit if the oil was dripping out of the candle, which it would seem that Rabbi Shimon wouldn't necessarily hold by. Aval kosu ka'arav hashashis lo yazizam mimakomam. But when it comes to a cup and cup and a bowl, thank you, and a lantern made out of glass, so these things, they should not be moved. So the Gemara asks, "My shanahani, why is it a different rule when it comes to a nair that we've been talking about, the earthenware ones, and this kos ka'ara ashashis, these other vessels that you might use to hold oil? Ama ula Seifa Asa'an Rabbi Yehuda. Ula says, well, this latter part of the Mishnah is actually the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who prohibits moving things aside. But, as we're about to see, that might not be the case. Maskif la Mar Zutra. Mar Zutra challenges this. Ihachi, my aval. If we're saying that the end of this Mishnah is going according to Rabbi Yehuda, why did it use the word aval? Aval means but. Why did it use that phraseology to mention these three items? Because he would hold that everything is forbidden. Ela amar Zutra la'olam Rabbi Shimon. So rather, Mar Zutra says the Mishnah was according to Rabbi Shimon. The Shari Rabbi Shimon b'ner Zuta the date alavay. But when Rabbi Shimon was permitting being able to move things, he was talking about a small ner of alhani de nefishi lo. But these items, which are much larger, he would actually say would have a classification of muksa, because as we said, he doesn't think that something so large is ever going to be finished up on Shabbos. And because your mind is not on being able to potentially use these items, he would say, therefore, that they are muksa. Says the Gemara though, Vahatanya, but hold on a minute. We have a Baraisa, we have another teaching. Mosa Hashemen Shebener V'Shebeka'ara Asur. We have another teaching which says that leftover remaining oil, which is inside a lamp, and which is inside a bowl, Asur, they are prohibited on Shabbos. Rabbi Shimon Matir, but Rabbi Shimon permits it. Well, hold on a second. We've got a ka'ara over here. It's mentioning a bowl, which Rabbi Shimon is permitting. So which is it, Rabbi Shimon? Are you forbidding it, or are you permitting it? Hasam ka'ara dumya d'ner. The Gemara answers over there, the ka'ara is similar to a lamp, whereas over here, ka'ara dumya d'kos. Whereas over here, we're talking about oil remaining in a bowl, which is similar to a cup. So in the proof that we tried to bring just now, that's actually a smaller type of bowl, and therefore, even according to Rabbi Shimon, it's okay. But over here, which is our case in the Mishnah, where we've said that it's forbidden according to Rabbi Shimon, that's because it's a very, very large bowl. Okie dokie. Says the Gemara, Ama Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera says, Pamot shehid liku bo b'Shabbos. If you have got a metal candlestick. Now, a metal candlestick is different from an earthenware candlestick because it doesn't get the same kind of residue, which would make it ma'us, which would make it abhorrent to the user. So, Rabbi Zera, how much liku ba b'Shabbos? If you've got a lit candle in a metal candlestick on Shabbos, ledivrei hamatir asur. This is interesting. According to one who would usually be lenient, who would usually permit it, which would be Rabbi Shimon. Very good. So he would actually forbid it in this instance. Why? Because it's very large. L'divrei ha'oseh, but according to Rabbi Yehuda, who would typically forbid such things, he would say mutter. Why would he say mutter? Because it's not going to get disgusting and abhorrent and whatever fanciful words you want to use. It's not going to be mius. I've heard that word used a lot more up in Manchester than I do down in London. People use it quite colloquially in a way that gets understood. And if it's mius, gross, don't go near it. But that doesn't get used so frequently down in London. Juliet, would you agree? Are you still here? Can't see you on the screen. Nikki, is it?
Totally. Not in South Manchester.
Not in South Manchester.
No, only North.
No, that's fair enough. Actually, I think I remember it more from North as well.
I've never heard it before. No.
You've not? It obviously didn't reach the Merseyside then.
In Liverpool and South Manchester, we have standards.
Stay away from me.
I'd say they were higher in Liverpool.
Okay, so Lemeinra de Rabbi Yehuda Muksa Machmas Islay. That would mean to say, therefore, that Rabbi Yehuda has this concept of Muksa Machmas Mius, of something being disgusting, as they say in Manchester. muksa machmas iser leislei. But that would seem to infer, though, that this other concept of being muksa because of the fact that it is usr, right? You can't move a candlestick when it's lit. Okay, if Rabbi Yehuda is permitting a metal candlestick, then we seem to be doing away with Rabbi Yehuda holding by muktzah machmas iser. So it's consistent with the fact of muktzah machmas mius, because he's saying it's not mius, but it's inconsistent because it should be muktzah machmas iser. So to that, the Gemara says, "V'hatanya Rabbi Yehuda kol haneiros shel mateches metaltelin chutz min haner shehidliku bo b'Shabbos." Rabbi Yehuda says all candles that are made in metal candlesticks, they are allowed to be moved on Shabbos, with the exception of a candlestick that is a light on Shabbos. So that would seem to indicate that he does hold by muktzah machmas isur, that if it is a light and there's a risk of it going out, you would not be allowed to move it. Ela itma hachi itma. Rather, the Gemara revises it as follows: Amar Rabbi Zeira, pamot chidliku alav b'Shabbos. If you have got a metal candlestick that is a light on Shabbos, divrei hakol aser. Everybody would say that it is not allowed to be moved. But lo hidliku alav divrei hakol muta. But if it was not a light, then according to all opinions, you would be allowed to move it, because we're not worried about muksa machmas iser. We're not worried about muksa machmas mius. And so even according to Rabbi Yehuda, you would be allowed to move it. We have reached 2 dots for those of you following.
Rabbi,
yeah, good luck.
If you've got a metal candlestick with, I assume, a candle in it that's unlit, why would you want to move it? I mean, what would be the need to move it? Because you can't light it once Shabbat is in, so why be able to move it in the first place? Because if you can't move a lit one for fear of extinguishing it, why would you need to move one that's never going to be lit during Shabbat anyway?
Richard, it's not the tradition of your house to swing candlesticks at each other?
Occasionally.
How else would you reenact Cluedo?
I mean, I'm just trying to think, even in times when people would have used candlesticks, why would there have been a need to move a candlestick when you weren't going to light it? Surely, in and of itself, it's a muktzah object.
It's in the wrong place. Would that be a reason why? You need it out of the way?
Okay, I can understand you might need it out of the way, but so does that mean that if you've got a metal candlestick and say, for example, you've lit the Shabbos candles, the Gemara is then saying that you can move that candlestick once the light's gone out? Is that?
It depends who you're holding by. It would seem Rabbi Zeira, pamot shehidliku alav b'Shabbos, if it was lit at the beginning of Shabbos, divrei hakol aser. That it would. I think it's saying that it's forbidden to use it even when it's out. If it was lit at the beginning of Shabbos, it would be forbidden to use even when it's extinguished. Okay. But if it was never lit before Shabbos, then it could be. Am I reading that right, Rabbi?
Yeah, I mean, once it's it depends on how far you push muksa, but you would not be able to move it for if it's a muksa machmas iser or muksa machmas iser. It would not be able to be moved.
If you had a silver candlestick that was never lit before Shabbos,
yeah,
would we say divrei hakol muta?
Well, it depends if it's muksa machmas chasar and kiss as well.
Ah, that's fair enough. Added dimensions, always fun. Okie dokie. So the rabbi was just saying that if it's a valuable item, then there's a separate problem of muktzah that would make it problematic to move. With all of these things, consult your local halachic authority. I'm sure he'll be happy to stick around on Zoom at the end of the year. Says the Gemara, 2 lines up from the bottom of the page, or if you're looking at the screen, in the middle of the screen. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav, Mita sheyachda lema'os asur letaltala. A bed which has been designated as a place to store money would be forbidden to move on Shabbos. Entering now into this second topic that we were talking about of hazmanah, where something has been dedicated or designated for a particular use, which the use would not be allowed on Shabbos. So, a bed that has been designated for money may not be moved on Shabbos because it has been set aside for that use. Says the Gemara.
Just Rabbi Nick, Tosfos just explains that once you're setting it aside for such a function, you wouldn't use it for sleeping. So that's the reason why it's muksa. But if it would be something which is used for hiding your cash as well as for sleeping, it might be different.
So for those of you who don't frequent the bank and you store your cash under your mattress, let me know your address and I'll be right round. Says the Gemara, Meisaveh. We have a proof against this. A challenge. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Metaltel ner chadash aval lo yashan. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, quoting our Mishnah again, the position of Rabbi Yehuda that you can move a new candle, but you can't move an old one. Turning the page. Uma ner de lahachi avida ki lo hidlik ba shari letaltula. Mit de lav lahachi avida lo kol shekain. Says Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, a lamp which is made for the purpose of lighting, and if it's not lit, would be allowed to move. So what about a bed? It's not specifically made for the purpose of placing money. So, all the more so, I should be allowed to move it because it's not meant for storing cash, and therefore, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak challenges this and says that one should be allowed to move it. Ela i'itma hachi itma. So we revise the statement in the following way. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav, Mita sheyachada lema'os. If a bed was designated for money, then the following halacha applies. Hiniach aleh ma'os asul letaltala. If it did indeed have money on it, then it would be forbidden to use. Lo hiniach aleh ma'os mutar letaltala. But if it did not have money on it, then it would be allowed to move. Lo yachda lema'os. If it had not been designated for storing the money, then yesh aleha ma'os asur letaltala. If it did have money, you would not be allowed to use it. Ein aleha ma'os mutar letaltala. But if it did not have money on it, then you would be allowed to move it. So we've got this duality over here of designation, non-designation. Is the money on it? Is the money not on it? Depending on the permutation and combination of those factors, that will determine as to whether it's something that can be moved or not. So if it is designated for money and it has money, can't move it. If it's designated for money and it doesn't have money, then you can move it. If it's not designated and it doesn't have money, then you can move it. And if it's not designated and it does have money, then you can't. Pardon me, Rabbi.
Yeah, I just think that the beginning part's talking about even if the money is now removed. No?
Which part? Lo hiniach.
Meaning, if it's a bed which is your money bed, then.
Oh, you mean if it's been used at least once before?
Yeah.
Yeah, that probably makes sense.
Because the Sefer is talking, it says where the money is off of it, that you could move it, but so it wouldn't work. I think the distinction is whether it's miyached or not.
Thank you very much. So in light of that, then, we would say as follows. A bed that has been designated for money, if it has been used for money, you would not be allowed to use it. If it has not yet been used for money, then you would be allowed to use it. And if it has not been designated beforehand, then if there is money on it, can't use it. And if there's not money on it, then you can use it. That's why they call you the senior rabbi and they call me Bushy Shu. Okie dokie. But nonetheless, the Gemara says, V'hu shelo hayu aleha bein hashmashos. That is as long.
My Gemara is prettier than yours, that's all.
Yeah, mine's more coloured in. So the Gemara goes on to say, that is as long as there hasn't been money on the bed throughout the whole period of Bein Hashmashos, which we mentioned right at the beginning of this year. It's something to bank in the brain. There's a lot of moving parts to this, pun intended, and so there's a lot to keep track of. But something that was in the wrong place throughout the whole of Bein Hashmashos, the twilight period, then you would not be allowed to move it. If you thought this was hard, boy oh boy, are you in for a treat with the rest of this stuff. Amar Ula, says Rav Ula, Mesiv Rabbi Eliezer.
Can you move the page up?
I can.
Thank you.
There you go. Rabbi Eliezer raises an objection. Now, we don't want to dwell necessarily too much on this because there is a level of complexity which, if I was rude, I would say is far beyond anything that you could understand, but I'm going to be truthful and say it's anything far beyond I can understand. But essentially what we're dealing with over here is a wagon, and wagons come in two parts. There's the carriage and there are the wheels. And what we're about to see here is that there is a difference in halacha as to whether wheels are considered a part of the wagon, or whether, because they are detachable wheels, they would be considered separate to the wagon. That's about as much background as I can handle explaining. But it should help us somewhat understand the details of Rabbi Eliezer's challenge, but we don't necessarily need to go into all of the details at this point in time. That can be your further and wider reading throughout the day. Maybe this was one of the reasons why Rabbi Feldman wanted it moved to 9:15, to give everybody that full amount of time to really explore the depths of this stuff in all its beauty. But the Gemara says as follows: a challenge from Rabbi Eliezer. Muchni shala bizman shehi nishmetes. When it comes to wagon wheels, when they are removable, when they are detachable. So the following four halachas would apply to wagon wheels that are detachable from the rest of the carriage. They are as follows. Number one, ein chibur la. They would not be considered as a part of the whole entity of a carriage with regards to tumah, with regards to ritual impurity. They would be considered as separate entities when it comes to figuring out if something has become impure or not. Ve'ein nimdedes ima, and they would not be counted with and would not be measured with the rest of the carriage in determining whether it has a particular size of 40 se'ah, which would make it something that can become tameh or not. So it would not be included in the sum total of the size of a wagon. Ve'ein matzeles ima ba'ohel hames, and it would not be counted as part of the entirety of the wagon with regards to ohel hames, which is a type of impurity that comes about, that is transmitted from being under the same roof space as a corpse. That is how the tumah is transmitted, under a shared roof space. So the wheels would not be considered part of the whole carriage. Ve'ein goruin, and this one is particularly relevant to what we're talking about. Ve'ein goruin osab b'Shabbos bizman sheyesh alei mars. And if there is money on the wheels at the time of Shabbos, you would not be allowed to pull the wagon along. Says the Gemara, ha'ein aleha ma'os sharia. But if there was no money on the wheels, then you would be allowed to move the wagon on it. Afagav tahavu alei bein hashmashos, even if there was money on it at the time of bein hashmashos. So those are the four halachas that are pertinent to a wagon. The fourth of which is relevant to our case, because we had just been saying that if it is that if something had money on it throughout Bein Hashmashos, you would not be allowed to move it. And what we're seeing over here is that if, one second, is that the relevance over here? That you can't move it if there's money on it, but if there's no money on it, then it would be allowed, even if money had been on it throughout Bein Hashmashos. So before we had said that that if something is on it during Bein Hashmashos, it wouldn't be allowed, and that was according to Rabbi Yehuda. And now we're seeing another piece of evidence from Rabbi Eliezer that would say you would be allowed. So we're going to say, therefore, that this challenge from Rabbi Eliezer must be Hahi Rabbi Shimon he delays le muksa. So it must be according to Rabbi Shimon, that Mishnah that we've just brought, because he doesn't hold by muksa in that regard, and that's why you'd be allowed to move this wagon wheel even if it had money on it during Bein Hashmashos. V'Rav Rabbi Yehuda Sfirale, and Rav is holding like Rabbi Yehuda, because if money was on it during Bein Hashmashos, then it should have been forbidden throughout the entirety of Shabbos. Do we stop there? Do we go a little bit further? We finished the page. So too we're saying that it is reasonable to say that Rav holds like Rabbi Yehuda, because Amar Rav manichin ner al gabe dekel b'Shabbos. Rav says you can put a candle on top of a palm tree on Shabbos. Ve'ein manichin ner al gabe dekel b'Yom Tov. But you can't put a candle on top of a palm tree when it's Yom Tov. Now, theoretically, these things should not be forbidden on Yom Tov because it's different. Different halachas apply between Yom Tov and Shabbos. Oh gosh, I feel like I'm going to get lost over here. So if we want, we can say that this works. This opinion is consistent with Rav holding like Rabbi Yehuda. And that is why there is a distinction between Shabbos and Yom Tov. Because on Shabbos, you would not be able to use the lamb. But on Yom Tov, you would be able to use the lamb. And we don't have the same concerns. Ella, Iyamarkt Rabbi Shimon Svirale, Mali Shabbos and Mali Yom Tov. But if you hold that Rav is saying like Rabbi Shimon, then what would it make a difference if it was Shabbos or Yom Tov? He would always say that it's allowed. And so to have a phraseology where we're differentiating between Shabbos and Yom Tov, that would be sounding more like Rav and Rabbi Yehuda than it would sound like Rav and Rabbi Shimon, because Rabbi Shimon would hold that it is always permitted. For Rav, then just a tiny drop more. For Rav Rabbi Yehuda Sfirale, are we actually saying that Rav holds like Rabbi Yehuda? But hang on a minute. There was a question. What is the halacha with regards to moving a Hanukkah candle if you are worried about, I love how it's translated here on the webpage, if you're concerned about the Persian Zoroastrian fire priests. So are you allowed to move Hanukkah candles if you are afraid that there is a decree from non-Jews that you're not allowed to have candles lit? Are you therefore allowed to move your candles on Shabbos? For Amalahu Shapiv Dami, and Rav said, yeah, you are allowed to move them. So how is he saying that you're allowed to do that if he would be holding like Rav Yehuda, who holds very strictly that you can't move these things? So over here the Gemara says, Shas hadachak shani. It's different if there is a pressing circumstance that is in existence, since it would be a sakana to have these candles lit. So therefore, Rav would be saying that you can light them, that you can move them. Ordinarily, he would say like Rabbi Yehuda, though, that you can't. So Rav is consistent with Rabbi Yehuda, not consistent like Rabbi Shimon, if I've understood all of that correctly. And only in a pressing circumstance would it be permitted to move, even according to Rav. Ad kan for today. Shkoyach one and all. Um,